Hello again. I'm Frank Catterman here with my brother, Dr. Matt Catterman, and we're continuing our series on climate change. Well, today we have a pretty interesting topic. It's called policies and legislation.
Yeah, those that are governed by the United Nations and similar type of policies.
Right, so let's get the heavy hand of the government to come down on us again, right? No, but these
Well, it's
are
an international effort. It's not just
Right.
our government.
Well, that's the thing about international efforts is that they're all trying to get countries to follow certain recommendations. They can't really force anybody to do anything. So the United Nations sort of serves a neutral party in that way, I guess. Well, I mean, maybe not neutral, but a third party, to help countries kind of figure things out as they go along, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll leave. That sounds good. So, first of all, you mentioned the UN. Let's talk about the UN. There's also the Paris Accords, right? That's not really a UN thing, but what is the Paris Accords or Paris Climate Change Agreement?
Paris Agreement. Well, it's
Yeah.
kind of overseen by the UN too. I think they're involved with it. So the Paris Agreement is like a treaty among about 196 nations, I think, that agreed to it. And it started in 2016. And the purpose is that they meet every 5 years to go over plans that they have to reduce their carbon emissions and what they're going to do to adapt to climate change if the temperatures rise, above a certain level, and then what other countries are going to do to help them out. If you're a technology provider, you'll give assistance to other countries. So the big thing about the Paris Agreement is that the reason why they formed this treaty is they want that carbon emissions will be reduced so that we won't have a global surface temperature rise of above 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius. Meaning right now it's about 1 degree, a little bit above 1 degree, but if it goes...
I think it's 1.3.
Yeah, it's like 1.3. So if it goes above 1.5 to 2 degrees, they say that there will be... We won't be able to recover from the effects of climate change.
Ho.
So that's the premise of it.
All right, so, things like statements like that give me pause, right? Because making just a bold statement like, if it does this, then this, or else we're all dead, or whatever. I don't know what they're saying, but those kind of things worry me. I mean, maybe it's true, but you're saying if it goes above 1.5 to 2.5.
2, just above 2.
Oh, 2.
Not 2.5.
Until 2, okay, and we're at 1.3 now. You're saying that we're almost to the point of no return, almost. Is that what they're trying to say? All right, well, that's probably not a problem with it. I mean, how do they know that? Nobody's been on the Earth and experienced this yet, so how do they know that this kind of thing would be irreversible? Because the Earth has gone warmer than it is now in cycles several times with man not being on it, right? We agree on that part, right?
Yeah.
All right. So what I'm saying is we don't know. I mean, but no, I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying that it sounds very, very much like a theory rather than a fact. So does this Paris Agreement? Because a lot of times we don't talk about maybe things that we don't want to maybe talk about. But one of the things is, let's say that we do, reduce our carbon emissions, and we do really a good job at it, but the Earth temperature keeps rising. Okay, maybe there's nothing we can do to stop it. Well, I don't know.
That brings up a good point because...
My question, and then you can interrupt.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. But sometimes we need to say, what are we going to do if the temperature rises 2 degrees, and now we got rising, water levels. We've got places that are hotter than normal. I mean, what are we going to do to survive as a species if the Earth keeps warming? Okay, because that may happen anyway. That may happen, and so we got to think about those. Does the Paris Agreement talk about that?
Yeah, this adaptation strategies that countries are supposed to put in place, and they go over that at each of the meetings they have every 5 years, and they also have those COP meetings. COP 21 they just had. They talk about the same issues with that countries will have about adapting and things, so they do those as well. One other thing that the United Nations also does is they have developed as part of their Agenda 2030 is they develop sustainable development goals, which there's 17 of those. One of them is affordable and clean energy. So basically, if we have more solar and wind and different types of energy across the world, that will help.
Nukes, right?
Nuclear energy, exactly. There's sustainable cities and communities, cities across the world that have pledged they'll be net zero by a certain date. And I'm not saying that all cities can do that, because it's more easier for certain cities to get net zero than others. And they can do this by changing their transportation network, making that better. They can have more greener spaces within their city, more parks and, areas that people can do things in. So, and then the third one I was going to talk about is the responsible consumption and production goal, which is number 12.
Good.
Meaning that the way we manufacture our goods depends on how much emissions are being produced while they are doing it. So, this is basically comes into the companies themselves. If they're responsibly sourcing their raw materials, they're not contributing to more emissions and all that. They control their manufacturing process so they don't emit as much greenhouse gases or actually pollutants too is a big part of it. And
Right. That one is the one right there. I think that's a good one because after the UN recommendations and goals, plus the Paris agreements and stuff, it's up to each country to legislate on their own accords of what they're going to do to implement these things. I call it an implementation plan, if you would.
It's good for the most part, like for what you're saying. I think a lot of these things are good.
Yeah, good.
And there's, but just to kind of show you the importance of all this climate change with them, the Secretary General of the UN published a document in 2020 called Carbon Neutrality by 2050, the world's most urgent mission. So now the accountability is going to be so high for, carbon emissions and making sure that people, that we're reducing it and the pressure of people doing it, that, in there it says that it's time to put a price on carbon, shift the tax burden from income to carbon, from taxpayers to polluters. There's going to be more important than paying your personal and income taxes is by reducing the price they pay for carbon,
It could mean that, he's definitely wanting to say, let's tax those that pollute more. That's kind of what he's saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's put the burden on those people, which not a bad thing. Again, I don't like forcing anything. Some things you got to, maybe come down and you got to have law enforcement. That's, something you have to enforce. Law, so we have law and order, but you don't want, for things like this, I think the more you incentivize companies to do the right thing, because they can get more funding or more grants or more, tax breaks. If they do better about things like this, then they make more money. The taxpayers are good because their taxpayer money is going to something good, instead of punitive measures. Oh, you polluted more, so you're going to get taxed more. That's not too bad. I guess it's an incentive not to pollute so much. So I guess I can see that a little bit more than being just punitive. It's also an incentive because you don't want to be punished, I guess. So I think that could be acceptable. So.
Well, it also brings up in this document, they also make a point that in order to do business across the world, you're going to need to be environmentally responsible. I based this off a quote they also put in here, which says, make climate-related financial risk disclosures mandatory and integrate the goal of carbon neutrality into all economic and fiscal decision-making. Banks must align their lending with net zero objective, and asset owners and managers must decarbonize their portfolios. So, basically it's going to say in order for you to get a loan from a bank, you're going to have to prove that you're taking measures to, reduce carbon emissions and that you're not polluting for that company. The way business is going to be done in the future is going to be totally different in the future,
right,
because of climate change.
That could be very, very, very true. I don't see a law like that passing just yet in this country, but I think that you're right, that in the future they may have legislature that would implement something like that for banks to provide loans, and they have to make sure as they fill out their paperwork that they're taking the right measures to be carbon neutral. So that could happen. I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow, but I think it's going to happen. So
yeah.
All right. Well, that was great, the robust discussion. So we'll continue it on next time. We'll see you next time.